Hello and welcome to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, your weekly dose of the top pro-life news and issues, all from a Catholic perspective. I am your host, Catherine Hadro, in our Washington, D.C. studio. Thank you for joining us this Holy Week. In this week's show, two Catholic canon lawyers break down excommunication for pro-abortion politicians. We speak out against a billboard welcoming people into Illinois that promotes abortion. And this.
I know it sounds strange to people, but for the first time in my life, I really looked at that pile of body parts on the side of the table.
We share the powerful pro-life conversion story of a former abortionist. But first, our top story: Congress takes up a number of pro-life issues before the Easter recess. In the month of April alone, House Republican leadership filed a discharge petition to force a floor vote on the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. There was also the Senate committee hearing this month on whether big tech has been censoring pro-life social media accounts. And last week, a Senate committee held a hearing for the pain-capable Unborn Child Protection Act, a bill that would end abortions at 5 months of pregnancy, which is when science shows babies can feel pain. At that hearing was Senate Judiciary Committee member Senator Josh Hawley, who questioned abortion attempt survivor Melissa Ohden.
Tell us why you think that's true, and why in your case and in all of these cases for babies born like you, prompt treatment is absolutely vital.
I think that's another great question, Senator. I survived at a hospital because, of course, most late-term abortions take place at hospitals, not because they're trying to prepare themselves to provide care to children like me, but because of the greater risk to women's health.
We had the chance to speak with Senator Hawley after the hearing. Here's our interview. Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri joins us now from Capitol Hill. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Senator, you serve on the Senate Judiciary Committee, which recently held a hearing on the pain-capable Unborn Child Protection Act. What were your main takeaways from this hearing?
Well, first of all, it is absolutely vital that we protect infants in the womb who can feel pain, and they can feel pain as early as 20 weeks. I mean, the studies show, the science on this is just overwhelming, that the infant will recoil if they're prodded. Their pain stress hormones will spike if they're prodded. I mean, these are infants who can feel pain. In fact, it's interesting, surgeons, when they're performing surgeries to actually help the infant, will anesthetize the infant at that age, precisely because they're able to feel pain. So it is incumbent upon us to protect these infants in the womb who can feel pain just like an adult can, and to make sure that they're not subjected to these gruesome and terrible abortion procedures.
You questioned abortion survivor Melissa Ohden at the hearing. What did you learn from her witness?
Oh, you know, she was an incredible witness. She's an abortion survivor. She was left to die after she had survived her abortion, but fortunately there was a nurse there at a hospital. She was born in a hospital. A nurse there who rescued her, took her to the neonatal intensive care unit, and was able to save her life. And today she's just an amazing woman who has done incredible things, an incredible advocate.
At this hearing on the pain-capable bill, your Democratic colleagues brought up the Georgia heartbeat legislation, Roe v. Wade, and Title X funding. Why were they conflating these issues? And in your opinion, did they address the issue at hand, whether abortions should be banned once babies feel pain?
Well, they don't want to address the real issue, which is the science shows overwhelmingly that the baby can feel pain at 20 weeks. And also, we are one of the only countries in the world, one of only 7 countries in the world, who permits abortions in these circumstances. You know who else is on that list? China, North Korea, Iran. This is not the kind of company that we want to be keeping, and unfortunately my Democrat colleagues, they don't want to face up to the facts here. They don't want to face up to the science. You know, science has shown us, it shows us all new kinds of things about the human development that we've learned in the last few decades, and just in the last few years, and science shows us that these babies can feel pain. My Democrat colleagues don't want to talk about that. They have a weirdly anti-science position on this issue. And look, I think it's becoming more and more apparent. It's an extreme position that they've adopted, and the American people are rejecting it.
I want to turn now to other pro-life issues where you have been leading. Senator, you recently wrote a letter to Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey calling on him to open the tech giant up to an independent outside audit after Twitter recently suspended the account for the pro-life movie Unplanned. Senator, can you tell us about this letter, and have you heard back from Twitter?
I have not heard back, and look, it's a very simple proposition. Twitter has a history now of discriminating against conservative viewpoints, and especially pro-lifers. So this is what we call deplatforming, where they take away the social media platform of groups that they disagree with. And it's just happened too many times to be coincidental. With the Unplanned movie, it happened on opening weekend. Opening weekend. Is that a coincidence? So Jack Dorsey and company, they say, oh, it is a coincidence. Well, fine. Open up your books, do an independent audit, and then release those results to the public.
Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri, a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
And joining us now to break down all the pro-life headlines is Sue Swayze Liebel, the National Women's Pro-Life Caucus Coordinator for the Susan B. Anthony list. She joins us now from Indianapolis, Indiana. Sue, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. First, can you speak to Senator Hawley's pro-life leadership as a freshman senator, and particularly the voice he brings on the powerful Senate Judiciary Committee?
Oh, Senator Hawley is a pro-life rock star. You know, he's the former Attorney General of Missouri, whose experience is just invaluable on this very important committee that votes on, court nominees. And then before that, he worked for the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty and was a lead attorney on the Hobby Lobby case, fighting the Obama administration's abortifacient drug mandate at the Supreme Court. So he's just one of several courageous pro-life leaders on this committee, including another new senator, Marsha Blackburn, Joni Ernst, Lindsey Graham, Chuck Grassley, Mike Lee. Just it really shows us how important elections are.
Sue, it's been a busy few weeks on Capitol Hill here for the pro-life movement. Why do you think this is an especially good time to talk specifically about the PIN-capable bill?
Well, the extremism of the Democratic Party in states like New York and Virginia and in Congress even has put the national spotlight on the issue of late-term abortion and infanticide. That conversation is having an impact. We see it in the recent Marist poll that showed a substantial growth in pro-life views among Democrats, young adults, the incredible number, more than 250 pro-life bills introduced in states. I mean, this is just rolling through the country, this shock and awe on some of this infanticide and late-term abortion. And as Senator Hawley pointed out, and Chairman Graham has too, introduced the bill, he frequently mentions that United States is a radical outlier. We are a radical outlier on late-term abortion.
Senator Hawley also told us about how he is calling for an independent outside audit of Twitter after it suspended the Unplanned movie account on its opening weekend. And last week, Senator Ted Cruz, in a committee hearing, referenced a Susan B. Anthony list tweet that appeared to censor. Sue, how has Twitter been responding to claims of bias towards pro-life accounts?
You know, they weren't in that committee this week. You know, Senator Hawley was questioning representatives from Facebook and Twitter in several stunning exchanges during that committee last week. Everyone seems to agree that the big tech companies need to be more transparent, yet they wouldn't commit to making any of their protocols public. Senator Cruz, you may remember, he displayed on a visual a quote by Mother Teresa. It was actually from Marjorie Dannenfelser, the president of Susan B. Anthony. It was one of her tweets. Mother Teresa saying abortion is profoundly anti-woman. 3/4 of its victims are women, half the babies and all the mothers. And when he confronted the representative there, and do they consider that hate speech? Do they consider what Mother Teresa said to be hate speech? They had no response. They were completely silent.
Finally, Sue, we've been closely monitoring the House's discharge petition for the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. What's the deadline to get enough signatures to bring this bill to a vote?
Well, it's open-ended, and it doesn't really have a specific deadline. we want to be sure to keep the pressure on the Democrats who haven't signed on yet. We need a total of 218 signatures for the discharge petition. We have almost 200 at this point. So, members are going to be, members of Congress are going to be home in their districts on this Easter weekend and Easter recess. So it's really a good time for your viewers to make their voices heard, call their office, check if they've signed on yet or not. And you can find that out on ProLifeWeekly.com. You can see if your representative has or has not signed. And if not, you can click and send them a message.
Excellent. We have to continue to put that pro-life pressure on them. Sue Swayze Liebel, the National Women's Pro-Life Caucus Coordinator for the Susan B. Anthony list. Thank you again for joining us.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. House Minority Whip Steve Scalise recently filed a discharge petition for the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. This tactic is a way to bypass House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and force a floor vote on the bill because House Democrats have blocked it more than 30 times. But in order for the discharge petition to be successful, a simple majority, or 218 members of Congress, need to sign it. That brings us to this week's call to action. Go to ProLifeWeekly.com. Again, that is ProLifeWeekly.com. Here, you can find out whether or not your representative has already signed this Born Alive discharge petition, and then send a message directly to your member urging a signature if there isn't one already. Again, the Born Alive bill simply requires abortion survivors, infants who are born alive, receive appropriate medical care. In order to get to 218 House member signatures on this discharge petition, 21 Democrats will need to join every Republican member. When you go to the website, ProLifeWeekly.com, you'll be able to click a button and find out if your representative has signed the discharge petition. And based on that, we can craft a message to be for your specific U.S. representative. Send a message to your representative to sign the Born Alive discharge petition. Go to ProLifeWeekly.com. Turning now to our next segment, there have been a lot of questions recently about how the church is called to respond to politicians who claim a Catholic faith but push forward anti-life legislation. Take, for example, earlier this year, we saw New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, who claims to be Catholic, sign one of the most extreme abortion laws in the nation, the Reproductive Health Act, which allows abortion up until birth. And here on Capitol Hill, 10 senators who identify as Catholic voted against the Born Alive bill in February. And just last week, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy, who considers himself a lifelong practicing Catholic, signed a bill into law authorizing medically assisted suicide. He said he made the decision after careful consideration and prayer. To help us break this all down, we are joined by two Catholic canon lawyers who both happen to be my colleagues. Coming to us via Skype from Denver, Colorado is J.D. Flynn, the editor-in-chief of Catholic News Agency, and with us in studio is Ed Condon, the D.C. bureau chief for Catholic News Agency. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks so much for having us.
So there are a lot of questions that have been raised concerning excommunication. So first off, can you, our canon lawyers, give us a clear definition as to what excommunication is?
So excommunication is definitely a penalty. It's a penalty the church imposes legally on its subjects. Subjects are members of the church, those who are baptized Catholics. Now, it's important to understand that a penalty in the church can be one of two ways. Either it's a penalty that's a punishment. The idea is to punish someone for doing wrong. But the other thing that it is, in this case, excommunication, is it's a medicinal penalty. Its purpose is not to inflict damage on someone, but it's to call them back to conversion. It's to really hopefully prick their conscience and lead them back to the church.
Earlier this year, 10 senators who identify as Catholic voted against the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. This bill would provide medical care to babies who survive abortions. So why is excommunication appropriate or not appropriate for these senators in this case? JD, what's your take?
Well, I think for us as canon lawyers and for us as Catholics, it's really not so much our place to judge what is the appropriate penalty so much as what is the penalty that the church prescribes. The church teaches that those who advance an agenda that is inconsistent with life or an agenda that's willfully harmful to life should face a consequence for that because they're obstinately persevering in manifest grave sin, the church says. But the question of whether or not they would be excommunicated is a rather technical question and one that is really up to the Pope to decide as the supreme legislator of the church.
Ed, did you have any thoughts in addition to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with everything JD just said. The important thing to remember when we're talking about excommunication is it's a legal penalty for a legal action. Now, you can have legislators, you can have Catholics of all kinds in any position who are doing things that the church says are gravely immoral, supporting ideas that are gravely immoral, but this isn't necessarily a canonical crime. Excommunication is a canonical penalty for a canonical crime. We often have a sort of emotional use of the word where we think of it as it's just the way the church should punish people, but it's very specifically a legal term for a legal procedure for a legal action.
Okay, so moving now from Capitol Hill to the governor's mansion, there are really unique circumstances surrounding New York Governor Andrew Cuomo and his signing of the Reproductive Health Act into law, allowing abortion up until birth. What is the church's response here in this particular case?
It has been the response of the bishops of New York to recognize that Governor Cuomo has acted in a way that will lead to more abortions, has acted in a way that's contrary to the good of life. And a lot of Catholics have called for the bishops of New York, and especially Cardinal Dolan, to respond more concretely, perhaps to apply Canon 915, which would restrict the reception of Holy Communion. Catholics have also called for excommunication, and it's understandable why, because I think we all want to see consequences to what has happened. We all want to see that the church takes seriously a pro-choice politician really flaunting his Catholic faith and holding himself out as a Catholic while acting so contrary to the gospel. But the question for the Archbishop of New York to decide and the bishops of New York to discuss is how they can, in the context of canon law, apply a stern and just consequence to this action.
Ed?
I think that's right. I mean, in the case of Governor Cuomo, there are some extenuating circumstances. As JD said, his actions have contributed to more abortions being able to take place. He's also been very clear that he is a Catholic. He's been very clear that he considers himself to be governing as a Catholic in many circumstances. When he wants to champion different kinds of legislation, he's quick to invoke his Catholicism. And I think this is one thing that does make his situation a little unique, is he's so keen to link his own legislative agenda to his Catholic faith, even though two bishops, in this case Bishop Scharfenberger of Albany and Cardinal Dolan of New York, issued public warnings to him before the passage of this abortion act, and he went ahead anyway. Now, I think the interesting thing here is at a certain point, if someone's holding themselves out as a Catholic, saying what I am doing not just as a Catholic, but because I'm a Catholic, then at that point they're damaging the community of the faith. They're damaging the faith of other people.
Speaking of governors, what about New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy, who just signed an assisted suicide bill into law? He identifies as Catholic and said he made this decision after praying about it.
Yeah, here's another case where a Catholic governor, he is a Catholic, and a Catholic governor has said that his faith, his own spiritual life, has led him to make a decision that's inconsistent with the dignity of human life. All Catholics, all of us, I think, are looking for the church to respond with justice, with sobriety, and with a call to conversion, that call that I discussed, that is a part of excommunication and can be delivered, I think, in very serious ways in these cases as well.
Something that I was thinking when I was reading his comments was last week Archbishop Chaput of Philadelphia gave a speech in which he talked about American Catholics having divided loyalties as we're trying to build a Christian culture in this country, or rebuild a Christian culture in this country. This is the kind of divided loyalty that he was talking about. And it's the kind of divided loyalty that Catholics really can't have. That in the end, you are a Catholic first and foremost. Your duty is to the gospel, to God, and to life. And to say that your function as a public servant leads you to act in a way that is not just not consistent with your Catholic faith, but directly against it, is really to say, I'm choosing the world over God. And that is a real problem.
Thank you both so much for being here. JD Flynn and Ed Condon of Catholic News Agency, we are so grateful to have you both here.
Thanks for
having us.
You can hear similar conversations between JD and Ed on the CNA Newsroom podcast bonus episodes, and read JD, Ed, and the rest of CNA's work at CatholicNewsAgency.com. When we come back,
I can talk about abortion from a personal standpoint.
A former abortionist shares his powerful pro-life conversion story with us. Stay tuned as EWTN Pro-Life Weekly continues after this break.
Can you imagine that kind of God retaining his divinity and his intellect and his knowledge and his power in the womb of a woman? ever so small.
That is an old clip of our EWTN foundress, Mother Angelica, reflecting on our Lord's life and passion. We bring you that clip during this Holy Week and also in commemoration of Mother Angelica, as she would have celebrated her birthday on Holy Saturday, April 20th. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I am your host, Catherine Hadro. An abortion facility paid for a billboard greeting people coming into Illinois that celebrates the state's permissive abortion laws. That's this week's Speak Out segment. A Chicago CBS station reported that people driving into Illinois on a major intersection from Missouri are now greeted by a billboard that says, quote, "Welcome to Illinois, where you can get a safe, legal abortion." It was paid for by the Hope Clinic for Women, an abortion facility in Illinois that's just across the border from St. Louis, Missouri. And the billboard was created to take a jab at pro-life Missouri lawmakers who recently introduced several pro-life bills. In a Facebook post, the abortion facility behind it thanked the pro-abortion group Progress Now Colorado for, quote, sharing your brilliant idea with us. A spokesperson for the abortion facility told the Missouri Times that in Illinois, we must hold our ground on this issue and continue to expand access and affordability to abortion for the residents in our state and people needing to travel here. Contrary to the Hope Clinic's name, there is nothing hopeful about abortion. Abortion is the decision of despair. And contrary to what this billboard says, there is nothing welcoming about a pro-abortion message either. Illinois has some of the most permissive abortion laws in the country. A more honest billboard at the state's entrance would say, "Welcome to Illinois, a state failing to protect its most vulnerable residents." Remember, there is always something you can do to counter today's culture of death. Follow this week's call to action. Go to prolifeweekly.com. Send a message directly to your U.S. representative, urging your member of Congress to sign the discharge petition for the Born Alive bill so we can see a vote on the House floor. Some of the top pro-life leaders today are converts to the cause. And this next conversion story is remarkable. Meet a former abortionist who went from ending lives to working to save them in this week's Pro-Life Focus.
This is a grasping instrument. When it gets a hold of something, it does not let go.
From teaching lawmakers on Capitol Hill to students in college lecture halls.
A 12-week baby is the width of your hand, head to rump, not counting the legs.
Medical doctor Anthony Levatino teaches others about the reality of abortion. He teaches from firsthand experience.
Right along with, in my residency, learning how to do deliveries and hysterectomies and all the stuff that obstetrician gynecologists do, I learned to do abortions.
Levatino is a former abortionist who, by his own estimate, committed over 1,200 abortions.
Now, if you had asked me at the time what I thought about the abortion issue, I wouldn't have hesitated to tell you I was pro-choice. This was a decision between a woman, her doctor, and nobody, including the baby's father, had anything to say about it.
Meanwhile, Levatino was hoping to become a father himself. While doing abortions at his medical practice, at home, he and his wife struggled with infertility.
She went to the best infertility expert in town, and after a lot of tests and some very difficult times, we were basically told that it was not expected that we would be able to have a child of our own.
Longing for life is what led Levatino to first doubt his work as an abortionist.
You know, I would do 2, 3, 4 abortions in a morning when it was my turn. And I remember during that time thinking, gosh, I'm just throwing these kids in the garbage. Wouldn't one of these women allow us to take her baby home and care for our own? But of course, it doesn't work that way.
The Levatinos would eventually welcome a child after choosing adoption.
We were very blessed when in August of 1978 we were able to adopt a little girl that we named Heather.
The next month, the Levatinos conceived a biological child of their own, a son. They were now parents, twice blessed. But tragedy would soon rock the family's world.
Everything was just dandy until June 23rd, 1984, when our daughter Heather was killed out in front of our house in an auto accident. People who have children might think they have some idea what it's like to lose a child, but if they haven't been through this themselves, they have no idea, and I hope they never find out.
Carrying the pain that comes with losing a child, Levatino could no longer look at his work with the same eyes.
But what do you do after a disaster? You bury your child and try to get back into your life. And I don't know how long after that my first D&E abortion was scheduled, and I reached in with this heavy clamp called a Sofer clamp and tore out an arm or a leg and just stared at it in the clamp, and I got sick. But when you start an abortion, you can't stop. You have to keep inventory. You have to make sure you get 2 arms, 2 legs, and all the pieces. Because if you don't, your patient's going to come back infected, bleeding, or dead. So I finished that abortion, and I know it sounds strange to people, but for the first time in my life, I looked. I really looked at that pile of body parts on the side of the table. And I didn't see her wonderful right to choose, and I didn't see what a great doctor I was taking care of her problem, and I didn't even see the $800 cash I just made in 15 minutes. All I could see was somebody's son or daughter.
He calls that moment the beginning of the end. It's what led him to walk away from abortions and, today, share his unique conversion story with others. He's helping to share other pro-life conversion stories as well, playing the role of an abortionist in the movie Unplanned.
It is not preachy. It is the story of Abby Johnson, and it's told accurately. And I will tell you, from having been on the set and then watching the final product, what you see on the screen is extremely medically accurate. They got it right.
You can also see Levatino in videos produced by the pro-life group Live Action. He narrated their abortion procedure series to educate people about the reality of abortion. Millions and millions have viewed them.
Today I'm going to describe a second trimester surgical abortion called dilatation and evacuation, or D&E.
So while it's his experience as a former abortionist that gets people to listen, it's his role as father that compels Levatino to share his story with us in the first place.
I suppose the one thing I can offer that's a little unique is the same thing any doctor could offer. I can talk about abortion from a personal standpoint. The stories I tell are firsthand and true. And I think that gives it a level of credibility that's difficult to get otherwise. And I think that's the biggest role I can play.
What a powerful story. Thank you, Dr. Levatino, for your witness. That does it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I pray that your Easter is glorious. He came that we might have life. Until next week, I'd love to hear from you. You can email us at prolifeweekly@ewtn.com or look for us all over social media. Just search for EWTN Pro-Life. And remember, life is a gift. Your life is a gift. God bless.